Hello, this is your host, Tyler Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and hit the notification bell. Don't forget to follow me on Telegram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can support me on Local, Subscribestar, Buy Me a Coffee, and also make sure to check out my Substack, where I will be writing articles throughout the year. I just dropped a new article, part of a series I'm planning called Esoteric Geopolitics, where I'm starting with Russia. So now we are again joined by Rain, friend of the channel. Glad to have you back, Rain.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me on, Todd.
So this is going to be one of a three-part series that Rain, you reached out to me privately to discuss as an idea for a show. The idea that we look at how modern technology has affected air power, sea power, and land power in that order, because you perceive, at least from the point of view of a conflict in the Pacific, maybe not in Europe, land power is going to be far less important than it would have been, say, even in World War II, like when the U.S. Marines would hold Japanese islands. So in that regard, we're going from the other thing I like about your schema, Rain, is that you go from air power stands above all the others, and then sea power is kind of more important than land power, as we saw with the British and Americans in 2 world wars, and then land power, right? So it's like an order of operations of importance, and we're going to cover each of those to get people caught up to speed, so to speak, on what you could expect should appear a conflict between U.S. and China break out. One of the things that we're going to cover tonight is, of course, the aircraft generations, OODA loop. That's important with John Boyd, and how, of course, that affects decision-making processes, and then also the different models of Chinese jets. So is there anything you'd like to add as part of an introduction before we get going?
As a part of introduction, I will also say that, in generally speaking, land power beats naval and beats. Sorry, I said wrong. Like air power beats both naval and land power. So that's why I think it's important to cover land power itself, because that's kind of the most important than versus both navy and land. Yeah.
Right. So I guess if you're ready, we can start with the presentation.
Yeah, we can get started. So in this first slide, as you can see, is during the holidays, there's like a big breaking news that actually happened that a lot of Western media didn't cover, is that China unveiled 2 of its 6th generation fighter. As you know, the J-20 and F-22, the aircraft that is operated now, are 5th generation fighters. So what China shown the world is the 2 6th generation fighter. And this was, I would say, like a bit of a shock to Western military analysts. And that's why it wasn't covered much in the news. And another interesting observation that I had is like you remember the big H-1B debacle on Twitter. That happened right after those 2 6th generation aircraft was revealed. Actually, they were video of their flight. And I feel like maybe the reaction to that is maybe like a Sputnik moment for America when those aircraft was revealed. So I feel like it will be interesting to cover the different generation of air warfare, as well as getting detail about what those 2 6th generation aircraft is about.
Right. Now, the other thing is, from a Western audience perspective, most policy wonks who actually study the releases of Western reports on Russian or Chinese technology have at least a little bit of familiarity with the J-20. These newer ones, like you said, were just dropped in December of last year, so they're not nearly as well covered. The basic understanding amongst Western experts is that these the J-20, as of the J-20, China was still slightly behind a little bit, but only in the sense that once it gets its industrial productivity up, once it gets its engineering staff fully staffed, it will be able to close the gap pretty easily. It's sort of like ramping up a production line. So if you start off a production line with only a few runs, it's going to be pretty high cost per unit. And so you just won't make that many units, which means you won't get better at making the thing. But if you have a long run for like 20 years, you could reduce the unit cost to a really low level and get a lot of those planes out, which will then allow you to refine them and improve and close the gap with the West. So the most honest Western analysts are like China's not that far behind.
Yes, I would say that in most um, just I would say like just the quick answer to that, I would say like is depending on which aspect of the technology. For example, if you take the J-20, like the uh, combat fighter, for example, China is generally slightly better than the West in terms of radar, but in terms of engine is quite a bit behind. So is not is dependent the subsystem, but in generally like in the overall uh, is slightly behind, but it's also behind in the different aspect of it. And what happened when those two sixth generation fighter was revealed is that is the first time that China actually is ahead of Western air power in terms of technology. So that was the I guess what make an actual Sputnik moment.
Now, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later, but are any of the two black airplanes fully automated drones, or are they piloted?
Uh, Both of this airplane, they are sixth generation fighters, so they are manned. But as we will go into detail in this presentation, they will all one of the big aspect of sixth generation fighter is that they are behave a bit more like a frontline commander, and they will have like a squadron of capable and manned fighter that will fight alongside them. And one of the I would say like unfortunately for this presentation is like I unfortunately didn't have enough time to cram the actual information and the specific of different loyal wingman itself, but we will be able to cover the sixth generation air warfare and the fighter themselves quite well. And I think in the future we can actually have a short capsule just to cover the loyal wingman themselves.
Okay, do you want me to flip the page to the next slide?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So we've got aircraft generations, the OODA loop and air warfare generations. What makes a sixth generation fighter? Chinese sixth generation fighters, J-36, J-50, and then future episodes. All right, so let's start with aircraft generations.
Yes, you can. Yes. So I think you can change the slide. Okay. So I think like before we talk about the sixth generation aircraft, I think we should it would be a good idea to to give a general idea what aircraft generation means. Actually, the aircraft generation was invented more as like a gimmick and propaganda between the Soviet and the US. But as time goes on, they kind of become a very good way to define they, they eventually become a good way to define the technological level of a fighter jet. So just to go quickly, so you can change the slide. So the first three generation of aircraft, those are, I guess, the least interesting, but they were like you can all consider them to be the early fighter jets. So the first generation are basically those first jet that we had in the end of World War II. An example would be the Me 262. Then during the Cold War, as technology advanced, they start to get supersonic flight. They start to have radar and have air-to-air missile, and that's your second generation. And when the third generation and then the sensor and avionic improves again, and those aircraft become the third generation. The third generation, those first three generations, there's actually not that. Uh, I would say those are pretty old stuff, but the interesting stuff actually happens by the fourth generation. That's where uh, I don't. It seems that you don't see the image. Oh, I guess the image disappeared for the fourth generation, but the fourth generation fighter, the image got bugged. But basically, an example of fourth generation fighter would be your Su-32 and your F-15. Those are like your first modern fighters, so to speak. They 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 are the first with like actual fly-by-wire modern avionic, and they are the first one that can do those really super maneuverable thing that you see in there's air shows. And they kind of would be like the best fighter of the Cold War. And then you get to the fifth generation fighter where the technology take another big leap. So that is where by the time of fifth gen is where stealth is applied. They still keep the maneuverability of the fourth gen, but since you have to be stealthy, you're sacrificing some aerodynamics. But the fifth gen fighter, they compensate this by having more powerful engines, so they are still very maneuverable. And another thing is that they can fly at supersonic speed without using afterburner, which is super cruise. This is very important because when you're fast, your missile start faster, and you can shoot a target at further away. But besides self, the last and most important upgrade that I think I know how to control the slide now. So the last I think yeah, the last and the most important aspect of the fifth the the fifth generation fighter is actually their sensors that they are capable of detecting enemy without being detected, which means they need to have modern A-star radar that is hard for the enemy to know that they are being watched, and they have those uh, passive sensor around them. For example, if you look at the image of the J20 under its nose, you see like there's something that looks like a small cockpit under the J20. I don't know, Todd, if you can see that. Uh,
What? So where is it on the bottom?
and under the nose, there's like a
Yeah,
small.
yeah.
For example, this is actually an optical sensor. So when you're stealth, every time you send out the radar signal, you're actually advertising your position. So you also need those optical sensors to know where your enemy are. You have like infrared and stuff like that. So this is actually very important for fifth gen, and they also need to be network and be able to communicate without showing the position. So basically, fifth gen is you're stealthy, you're very hyper aware. So this is what air dominance is right now. Your air superiority defined by fifth gen fighter. But there's also something in between, is that as I mentioned earlier, that the fourth generation fighter, like those flankers and the F-15, they have very good aerodynamics and they can carry a lot of animations. So it's actually very useful to realize it's very efficient to give those fighters. They don't have stealth, but to give those advanced sensor of the fifth generation fighter and to give them a lot of weapons, so they will be there to assist the fifth generation fighter in their job.
So real quick, that's like basically the airborne version of a missile boat. You just have this guy full of projectiles and weapons, and he backs up the main front, right?
Yeah, because the fifth generation fighter, they to be stealthy, they need to carry all their weapon in the internal weapon bay, and the amount of weapon they can carry is very limited. So you have those like missile truck to assist them because they are very survival. They may not be fifth gen, but they are very survivable. So they make the best partner to the fifth gen, so to speak.
Now, would you say that like from you're talking about Russian and American and Japanese planes, but would you say like a Tornado would be a 4.5 gen fighter, the European Tornado?
Tornado, I'm not familiar with the Tornado, so I cannot say. But if it has advanced, I need to check online, but I'm not familiar with the Tornado. But the two main example that I would say of like the 4.5 would be the F-15EX and the J-16 of the Chinese.
Okay.
So now we covered the 1 to 5 fighter generation. So now that we are here, we are wondering like what is a step further? Like what make a sixth generation fighter? Because you start with like a basic jet, you get into supersonic, you get very maneuverable, you have stealth and hyper awareness, and what is the step further? So yeah, so to know what make a sixth generation fighter, we need to understand like different generation of air warfare. So actually, this is a graphic that I found in a presentation online. It was a presentation made by the chief designer of the J20, where he explained some of the reasoning behind the different aircraft generation as well as what define each generation. So in this graph, you see the OODA loop 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. Uh, they actually correspond exactly to the fifth, the fourth, fifth, and sixth generation air warfare exactly. So at the fourth generation with the Cold War era airplane like the F-15 and the Su-27 is you win by being more maneuverable, but then stealth get in, being able to know where enemy is more important. And then in the last is integration of AI is a step further. So in the next slide, I will explain a bit the different generation of air warfare. Then we can like put all the stuff together.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah. Also, in the meantime, if you want, like this can be, I know it can be like information dense sometimes. So if you think there's something that I need to clarify, just don't be afraid to
Yeah,
interrupt.
I think maybe we could talk about the OODA loop a little bit in case people who don't
Yeah.
really know what it is. So it was created by the Air Force Colonel John Boyd, and it's observe, orient, decide, and act. So it's basically a flow chart to make decisions, and the goal then is to interrupt with your action the A of the OODA loop, and the O, the A, or the D of the other guy, because that prevents him from making the action. So we could divide actually the OODA loop into just two categories: pre-action and then action. Pre-action is observe, orient, decide, and then there's action. And if you act first, then you have the possibility of disrupting the observer. So, for example, in the case of an airplane, so doing air warfare, that might mean you jam the signal to their radar, or that might mean you use some sort of electronic device to blind their optical sensors, in which case you're disrupting the observe part. So that's just a brief breakdown of the OODA loop.
Yeah, that's a actually very good explanation of the OODA loop. I actually realized I didn't actually prepare a slide to explain this fully, so it's actually good that you were able to explain it. So the next slide, I will start by like the OODA loop 1.1, which is applied to the first to the fifth air warfare. So basically, up for the first and to the fifth to the fourth generation air warfare, what most of the combat actually happened at a very short, rather short range, just like a few kilometers. And the missile are short range, the radar are short ranged, and the capability of the missile is actually quite poor. And the data link between aircraft is pretty poor as well. So during that time, what give you advantage is that you are fast and maneuverable, so you can get to them to a better position, so you can like interrupt, like you said, interrupt the enemy's OODA loop, and then you can make the kill, get to a better position and make the kill. So that's what's the gist of the air warfare for up until the fourth generation aircraft. But then
real quick, I want to make a point here about the OODA loop since you just mentioned the fourth generation here.
Yeah.
You said maneuverability is king. So basically what you're saying with that is that the focus of this loop is on the A part, the act, because you want to act first, right? You want to maneuver first to get in position to overcome the enemy. So I would imagine this would facilitate more high octane, fast-paced activities.
Yes, you are correct. It's also during this part where the dog fight actually matters, because you want to get into a better position so that it gives you the advantage during the combat. So that's why maneuverability is so important. So as you can see the image here, you have like a J-10 that is firing its gun at a target. And then after the fourth gen, we get into the fifth generation air warfare. This is the OODA loop kind of 2.0. At this point, the radar, the sensors, the missile, and the computer technology have increased by a lot. So Uh, so the maneuverability is no longer that important because the fight are decided beyond visual range. So often like you will win or lose when you and your enemy are like maybe 50 or over 100 kilometers away. So maneuverability and speed is no longer important because at this distance, like you're fast or maneuverable at a bit more at this distance doesn't matter too much. What's more important is for you to be able to detect the enemy first, and the enemy doesn't see you, and you can make the kill without him being realized that you already shot him. And that's why like stealth is more important than maneuverability. And also with the advancement of missile technology, because the missile can actually do the maneuvering for you. So now like stealth, counter intel, and intel, those advanced sensor and jamming is much more important than speed and maneuverability. So that's what defines the fifth generation air warfare.
So to also cast this in OODA loop terms, this would be prioritizing the first O, observe, which you said gather intelligence, gather information. So now what we've done is we've went from 4 to 1. So we've shifted back to the very start. Not that fourth generation air warfare, you didn't need to observe, orient, decide. Boyd comes up with this because ruminating on Korea. But the point is, though, the meta, to use a gaming term, the meta has now shifted to observe. And if you observe first, you win. And this is also seen in naval warfare. So in World War II, the first non-line of sight battle that was fought was the Battle of the Coral Sea in the South Pacific between the Japanese and the United States. And I think what fifth generation air war is sort of like that moment, but in the air.
Oh, sorry, I think I'm muted. Yeah, so it's basically that. And now we're by moving into the sixth generation warfare is because technology is still advancing. The computer we have better computer, better sensor. So this is getting uh, how do I say this? How do I say? We are actually getting more and more data to process. So now we are hitting a problem for the human pilot because now the pilot is getting fed more and more data. You got the radios like radar signal, infrared. You have to jam the enemy signal and everything. So it's becoming like more and more difficult for like one person to handle. So basically, you have to pilot your airplane and you have to manage all those like computer system. And not only that is because now with the rise in AI, you're also starting to get loyal wingman, which is like aircraft that can semi-autonomous that you can give orders. So now not only you have to pilot your aircraft to manage all those information and counter the the in the jamming and stuff of your enemy, you also have to manage a squadron of loyal wingmen. So it's basic. So what you're doing is basically you're flying aircraft, you're playing a software engineer, so to speak, and you have to, sorry, yeah, and then you also have to manage a squadron of drones. So as you can see, it's becoming quite difficult for one human to manage all that.
Yeah, and so for anybody who grew up watching documentaries about the Persian Gulf War or the war in Iraq beginning in 2000, one of the common themes that was talked about was two things: how to process all the information that was getting gathered. That was one, because there's it's hard for people to process all that information, and then two, to determine what information is actually usable and actionable, which is even harder because now you have all the data, but what can you actually use? Oh, you're muted, Rain.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking. There was still someone else at the office, so I was just telling him something. Yeah, so for those who don't know, I'm actually streaming from my office right now. So so let's continue. So the next, beside the rise of loyal wingman, is that there is also the further increase the range of the missiles. Like a lot of current use air-to-air missile, they may have like 100 or 200 kilometer range, but as time goes on, you get like air-to-air missile with those insane range, like 400 or 500 kilometers. That also means that the aircraft, those supporting aircraft, like the AWACS, the the tankers, and the bombers who normally stay in the rear, who are in a safe position, they are no longer safe. So the what considered like the front and the rear of an air battle is kind of blurred. So that's the third factor. So like this blurring of the front and rear.
Well, the other thing that's interesting about that is this is a reality that is often seen with asymmetrical warfare. So, right, the United States first really deals with this in Vietnam, where there's because of the tunnel networks and the insurgent quality of the Viet Cong, there's no clear front line and no clear back line, which is very disorienting for anybody involved in such a conflict.
Yes. So as you can, another detail that I also like to add is that a lot of people don't know, but like bombers actually still play a pretty important role in air warfare because you see those Tupolev, these Tupolev bombers, the red stuff that he has carried underneath, those are actually very long range missiles. So nowadays, like bombers, you can see them kind of like the artillery of the Air Force. They carry those very big and long range missile, and instead of carrying bomb, they stay in the back and they shoot those missiles from maybe 1,000 or 2,000 kilometer away.
Right. Well, yeah, because they're so far back, and you have to hit out further from there.
Now we bring back to this image of OODA loop. So pretty much when you're up to the fourth generation, what you win is to get in a better position, then the intel, and then when you reach at the sixth generation warfare, because of all that information for the pilot to deal with, you need to have something to filter the information. To use like a human example, for example, the human body that we have, we don't actually we are not aware of all the information that our senses give me. Our brain filters the most important one for us to help making a decision. So in the sixth generation, the importance of AI is actually to do this filtration so that we reduce all those sensory data from all those sensors from those network to reduce in a manageable chunk for the human to be able to make the decision. So that's kind of the center of the sixth generation air warfare.
Well, real quick, so that would basically then move it to the D, the make a decision, right? So instead of a human making the decision, it's the AI choosing which information is relevant to act on.
Uh, I would say I would say like the humans still make the decision, but the AI kind of filters the information in a more manageable.
Well,
Manage
let me put it this way: in the OODA loop, I'm not. You're right. The human doesn't leave the process unless it's a drone. But what I mean is, the decision-making process the human is involved in is very truncated because the amount of information or data he's working with is already been pre-vetted, decided by the AI to just be included in his package.
yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah, in the end, the human just kind of make the final decision. But I would say like even to that, he will representing like quite a lot of data, so is still quite complicated, but is in a manageable level. So that being said, what is what is the feature of a sixth generation fighter? So here, this slide, this is like a long list. So first, you have to be stealthier than the fifth generation fighter, which means full aspect stealth. One of the seldom mentioned fact about the fifth generation fighter, like the F-22 or the J-20, is that their stealth is actually very limited. They have they're stealth optimized from the front, but if you look at them from the side, from the rear, they're actually quite visible. So the so they have to approach they're stealthy, but they have to be careful with it. But with the sixth generation fighter, they are stealthy from every side. They're as stealthy as like a stealth bomber like the B2. So, but they still retain the maneuverability and the speed of a fighter. So they have much more liberty in how they want to approach the enemy. Of course, I would say like to retain that level of speed, you do sacrifice a bit of maneuverability, but the maneuverability that they lost is actually to be able to do those, like, the Cobra maneuver, those like very fancy stuff, but they still retain the ability of avoiding missiles. So it's a more like a defensive maneuverability versus offensive one.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and then the stealth is improved. Then as mentioned, they also need more powerful sensors. So because you're stealthier, but your enemy will also be stealthier. So you need to amp up the sensor, like more radar, more optical sensor. For example, this I don't know if is very visible. If you check the side of this Chinese fighter, you see like a part that is more white, and the nose that is more white part.
You don't
Uh,
mean on the bottom, do you?
Not in the bottom, but like in the head, in the head, like you
It
see,
looks
like
like there's a little panel below the cockpit. Is that what you
yeah,
mean? Yeah.
yeah. There are like two
Yeah.
panel, one that is white panel and one that is more gray. Those panel are actually like side-facing radar and optical sensors. So this one, they basically you can think of like having a mini AG system in the aircraft, so they like normal fighter, they can only look in the front and go around different angle, but this fighter, you can look at the front, look at the side, so just become very, very, very aware of his surrounding. And of course, you also get optical sensors to detect stealthy target. However, with all those informations, uh, you need to have a more powerful computer to run the AI and to crunch all those data. So you need to have like increased computer power, and because of that, you also need a more uh, a greater power generation, because all those systems need a lot of power. And that is why, if you notice in the back, this airplane have actually three engines. Uh, is those engine is not for greater thrust, but to be able to generate more electricity to be able to run this. And I read an article about this fighter that you see in the picture in particular, that the power requirement of its sensors is actually comparable to the Spy One radar of Alibird destroyer. So you need kind
Wow.
of a lot of power. Yeah. Oh, sorry. And then the less important but still important factor is be able to super cruise longer, is being able to fly at supersonic speed for a longer time, because that's where it gets you advantage when you launch your missiles. For example, the F-22 and the J-20, they say they can super cruise, but they can only do that for like 30 minutes. So it's like very short time. For example, for sixth generation fighter, you must be able to fly at supersonic speed without afterburner for at least 2 hours or plus. And you also need a greater combat radius, because you need to be able to stay there for a longer longer time. So basically, a best way to see a section ranger fighter is you can think it as a frontline commander who who control a squad of drones, but it can also fight itself and can also relay data to other aircraft. So another term to give to them, you can also think as like, instead of fighter, is more like a combat aircraft or a strategic fighter, so to speak. So yeah.
Yeah. So basically, because it's controlling drones or guiding drones, it has to, like a drone, loiter over the battle space longer, right? That's why it's important.
Yes, you had to stay at battle space longer and to be able to command those drones.
So does that mean, because one thing that comes to mind is any sort of weapon system that is more close in, like short range missiles or some sort of autocannon, would probably be on the drone, right? And then longer range missiles would be on the sixth generation fighter.
Yes. Uh, I would say like the dogfighting in the future will mostly done by drone. And I read an article that both actually China and US have tested the AI and drone, and actually AI actually already better than human pilot at dogfighting at this
Well, yeah, one of my themes is that machine that within the technological system, men eventually become replaced by machines, and there's one of your points right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So here I just want to give like a slight overview of like how an Air Force composition of at fifth gen versus sixth gen looks like. So like at fifth generation Air Force, you have your fifth generation fighter that smash the door, that destroy important enemy system. They are assisted by 4.5 generation fighter and UAV, and in the back they're supported by AWACS, tanker, and bombers. And once you get into the sixth generation fighter, the front line is mostly handled by drones and commanded by sixth generation fighter and the 5.5 generation fighter. So just 5.5 generation fighter is a bit like 4.5. They still have the they looks like they're basically fifth generation fighter that has some of this capability of sixth gen. So for example, China has made a J20 that has two seats called J20S. This one, it has the ability to command squadron drone, so it will handle some of the tasks of the sixth generation fighter. But what's also interesting with the sixth gen is that you also have stealth tanker, because like uh, traditional tanker, they're becoming more and more vulnerable. So you will need stealthy tanker and sixth generation stealth bomber to kind of do the task that they do before, because the non-stealthy one are just too easy to taken out. And very far away, like 800 or even 1,000 kilometers far away, that's when you get those sixth generation AWACS and no-stealth bomber, because like I said, with the increase in missile range, those non-stealthy platform is just too vulnerable to very long range air-to-air missiles. So you can think of like a sixth generation Air Force as like a family of system, basically.
No, yeah, yeah. In fact, even I guess what you call pre-generational air warfare, like in World War II, was still layered. So like a U.S. bomber squadron in World War II might have scout planes. One of the most popular one was a British Mosquito that would trail ahead with radar to see the enemy. There'd be the B-17s, B-24s coming up, and then there'd be P-51s as escorts. So even then, you still had to have a suite of air assets.
Yeah. So I would say like but now with the sixth generation warfare, it's like distance getting stretched out more and more. So that's actually a general theme of all warfare now. It's like both air, naval, and land. The distance is getting stretched out. So that's the general thing.
Yeah, so you're saying that the distance between it's getting stretched out because the aircraft are engaging at standoff distances rather than getting closer to dogfight. You see, that's actually been we can see this mirrored socially too, right? With like social media, the distance between people is increasing, the physical distance, right? Because they don't talk to each other.
Yep. I think I may have missed order. Oh no, actually no. So this is the Secretary Air Force. So next to slide, I like to show like a few new technology that we are seeing in the sixth generation warfare, sixth generation air fighters to reach the peak capability. Like one is actually to remain stealthy. You will start to see that the sixth generation fighter, they have like moving wing or tails, because the vertical tails of the fighters are actually increase the radar cross section by a lot. So one feature of the sixth-generation fighter, they are still fighters, so they still need some maneuverabilities. So what they are doing is like when they maneuver, they raise either their tails or their wing, they maneuver, then those parts fall back and they become stealth again. So that's one way to remain stealthy and maneuverable. Because unlike a bomber like the B2, like the B2 can be stealthy, but it doesn't have to maneuver. But a sixth-generation fighter, you still have to do the fighting.
Well, what's interesting is that mechanism of the wings is like World War II carrier planes. So in order to land on a carrier, for example, the Corsair would have wings that would fold up, but then when it would get airborne, it would flatten to engage Japanese targets.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, but it's more. But this is more in the air. Like you have the stealth mode and the maneuver mode. You switch between the two to maximize your survivability. And another thing that oh yeah, another thing to be stealthy is every time every gap in the airplane is also increase the radar cross section. So now with the sectional aircraft like the one that I showed earlier, their skin can actually move without a gap. So this also another way to remain stealthy. Yeah, it's look
Yeah.
very organic.
So wait. You're mentioning what those are called the flutes, right, on the wings,
Yeah, yeah.
and they can by folding back up, they reduce the radar cross section, but by folding down, they improve maneuverability.
No, it's not that. It's like to maneuver, you need to have those moving parts. But in traditional aircraft, they have like when they move, they have a gap in between, and those gaps make you more visible on radar. So what with a sectional fighter, what you need is for the skin of the aircraft actually become like more flexible, so that even though when you move, is like a skin that it doesn't create any gaps. So you retain yourself even though you're moving all those control surfaces.
Okay, that makes sense.
And another thing to remain yourself is that you need to do trust victory, but a more modern version because like the F-22 and the certain version, I think it's like a Su-35, their nozzle actually moves to increase the maneuverability. But when your nozzle move, you also create more radar reflection. So the sixth generation thrust vectoring actually use a more internal way to affect the direction of its jet so that it can change direction without moving any part. And as you can see, this is a way to change the jet direction in the image in the right. And there's another system about this that I didn't find any image is actually to kind of redirect the jet from the engine to another direction. For example, if you want to turn to a direction, you redirect the jet to, for example, you want to turn right, you open some jet from the engine and it come out and your other side and you turn and you don't have to move any surfaces. So those like all the stuff to remain stealthy but still retain the maneuverability of a fighter.
All right. Yeah, sounds complicated.
Yeah. Is yeah. Actually, one thing that I would like that to mention is like like sixth generation like we're gonna see in the sixth generation fighter is that the manned platform will getting more capable and more expensive, but there'll be fewer in numbers, and the number will mostly be filled by the by the unmanned platform, the Royal Wingman. So we're actually this at sixth generation there will be more aircraft, but there will be like you have like there will be like more dif I guess like the tier of aircraft would be much more the distance the difference would be much greater. You have very capable manned fighter and you have all sort of cheaper expendable uh, drones that do the frontline fighting. Yeah.
Well, also aren't there also some packages where the actual sixth generation fighter is a drone controlling other drones?
Uh, I was, I guess it depends how you define it because I would say that drones are part of the sixth generation family because sixth generation fighter need drones to do the fighting because his main job is not he's more like a commander rather than a pure fighter. He's a commander who can fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, okay, rather than just a fighter. But
Yeah.
well, maybe China has a different strategy because I remember hearing about a U.S. unmanned drone in production or at least in testing that would control other drones. I want to say Excalibur, but that might be wrong.
This one I wasn't too much, but in China, I would say like the direction that the Chinese Air Force is developing, they still think that the drones need some human guidance. Like the drone are much more independent than before. For example, now you can pretty much just tell the drone, okay, I have this in the radar, go there, uh, uh, go to kill that thing, and the drone will be able to figure out how to get there, what strategy to employ, so you don't have to micromanage them. But I would say like so far, the Chinese system is still the human that tell them what to do, but they know how to do it.
Okay, so it's sort of like the actual call, right? The call is made by the human operator.
Yeah, but the drone can decide. Is the drone make the kill? The human, like I would say, like the part where the drone it require a human to make the final decision to kill. I think that's we are already past that. Like the human, like the moment the human pilot tell the drone its mission, the drone will go there and make the decision to make the kill. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Now, just to correct myself, I did look this up. So the United States does have a fully automated drone called the Valkyrie, which is made to control other drones. I think so. That's part of it. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I would say like other drone, it could be also like relaying the signals because China also have drone that is work more like an information node. So it could be that as well. Because I don't think the AI is to a point where they can make the decision to what kill yet.
Right. So you're saying that you might have like three airframes then. The sixth generation fighter who controls all the other drones. Then there's the combat drones that actually target and destroy targets. And then there's sensor drones, right? That relay information.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, you have the fighter, the drone that is more there as a sensor. Some are there to fight, some are there to just basically like the drone are like filling every role the man aircraft had in the past. Basically, if you think of a role that the past airplane have filled, drone will do that.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So this image here is actually the the review of the six-cylinder fighter. There's like the big triangle is by the Chengdu Aircraft Corporation. They are the one who made the J-20, the fifth generation fighter, the J-20, and the other one is made by Shenyang Corporation. They are the one who made the J-16s. So as those who are I know most of your audience are more Westerners, so generally in China, the Chengdu Corporation, the one who built the Big Triangle, they take more risk and more innovative. They tend to be more risk taker with new technology, and the Shenyang Corporation is tend to be a bit more conservative, and this is kind of reflected in the fighter design they have. So after this, I will cover a bit of how those fighters are imagined uh, by those companies. But I will also add a detail that, unlike when the F-22 and the F-35 were decided, they were like two aircraft, and the Air Force chose one, and the other one was abandoned. But it was, I think, for these two sixth generation fighters, from the best of my knowledge, they are both will be entering service in like 10 years from now because like the development cycle of fighter is still pretty long, but they will play slightly different role, which I will explain as we go further in the presentation.
Okay.
So this is the two fighters. So the first is the Chengdu sixth generation, the tentatively named J-36. So this fighter, as you can see, is quite large. It has quite a bit deeper weapon bay. So this fighter is more, I would say, like more optimized. I don't know if I put some notes. No, I didn't. So I will just explain it here. So this fighter is actually more optimized as the the commander aspect, because to have this I would say like to have this shape, which is a supersonic flying wing, you're actually sacrificing a lot of maneuverability. So this aircraft is not maneuverable, is more maneuverable than the bombers, but is not. I would say like the maneuverability is not so good, but is very stealthy. So it will mostly rely on stealth to protect itself, and because it has three engines, it will produce a lot of thrust, so it's very fast. You can get to different positions very quickly. You can escape a bad situation very quickly, and it can generate a lot of power, a lot of electricity with those three engines to be able to power its sensor and computers. So this is more specialized as like an air commander. And this picture is very good. You can see those panels on top of the nozzle of the engine. Those are like its sensors, and it has three engines. So this one is stealthy, fast, and very much like a information node. It is very surrounding, but not very maneuverable.
That sounds like an interceptor then.
Yes, I would say like that's why I said earlier that sixth generation fighter, like interceptor, fighter, bomber, is kind of blurred because since the drone do most of the fighting, your main task is to be able to process the information and get into the right place, right?
Right. Now, so the sixth generation fighter, like you said, wouldn't dogfight. That'd be the drone's job. But
Yeah.
who would be targeting the bomber formations?
This fighter will actually be able to target the bomber formation because, as you can see in the previous video, it has those very big weapons that can carry very long range missiles. For example, not the biggest two missile in the middle, but the second longest one on the right. This one is a very ultra, I guess like a long range air-to-air missile. Those kind of missiles, they have a range of over 500 kilometers against like a target like bombers. So this fighter, if it gets within 500 kilometer of bomber or AWAC, it will be able to take it out.
So then this particular fighter then would be, I guess you could say, dual role, right? One role is like the commander, and then the other role would be to intercept and engage bomber formations.
Yeah,
Okay.
and yes, you and get from you will also be able to shoot out other targets since you also have like those smaller missile for shorter range, and they also have like this missile in green that you can see on the left. Those are for like close range, like just before the dogfighting distance, so we were able to shoot those short range infrared, very maneuverable missiles to take out anyone who get too close, and you can use this powerful engine to get away.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other sixth generation fighter that revealed is the Shenyang version. As I said, like the Shenyang Aircraft Corporation, they are more conservative with the technology. So as you can see this shape, so they took the approach of as I don't know if I have the uh, they're the one with like the shape shifting wing because they think that the fighters still have to retain the maneuverability of a fifth gen fighter. So instead, they have like this stealth mode and the maneuverable mode. So they would shape their wing. They do maneuvering and they will like the ring goes down again and they become stealthy again. So this fighter is more of a fighters take more of the fighter side of the sixth generation fighter. Is still like more stealthy than fifth generation fighter, and it has more like it's quite bigger than fifth gen. You still have this those sensor and can those computers, but those sensor and the data processing will be less powerful than the Chengdu version, but it will be just as maneuverable as a fifth generation fighter. So this is more of a sixth generation fighter, so to speak. And I heard this fighter will also be able to be put in a carrier. So it will be a carrier will be able to carry this, a variant of this, and they will be able to become like a localized commander in the Middle Pacific. So these two take a different kind of role.
So then would it be fair to say that this is also dual role? It's commanding the drone wing, but also it can be a dogfighter, air superiority fighter. Is that the word we're looking for?
It doesn't have a gun to do the dogfight, but I would say like its short range maneuverability will be comparable to the like F-22 or J-20. So it has like because the fifth generation fighter doesn't use dogfight that much. They actually use like those short range missiles because dogfight happen like at around like 1 kilometer range, but those short range missiles they can have like 10 to 20 kilometer range, so you'll be able to take out a dogfighter like 10 kilometer away. So most of the dogfight for fifth gen is already handled by missile, I would say.
Okay, so this would be more like intermediate ranges then. So short range would be the drones. This is intermediate, and then the sixth generation fighter proper is like long range.
Yeah, Yeah, and this one you can actually see like the three type of air-to-air missile is carried. The green smaller one, that's for short range, like the within visual range, and there's like a medium range that is like I would say like around 200 kilometers, up to 200 kilometer, and the big one there for target like 500 kilometer.
I see. So there's variable missile distances as well. Nice.
Yeah, because the missiles basically missiles you have to manage your energy and speed, so the performance is optimized for different range. So that's why you need to carry like different kind of missiles. But usually like three type is generally a gist of it. One for short within visual range where you can see the enemy from a 10, 20 kilometer away. One for like against fighter that is like a few hundred, like under 200 kilometer away, and one for like very long range where you send out something against a target 500 kilometer away.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's I would say like that's kind of the gist of it. So I guess I covered the generation air warfare and the two Chinese fighter. So like I said early on, so for this presentation, I wasn't able to had time to gather everything about the Royal Wingman and the other element of sixth generation fighter family. So I think in the future it would be interesting to release like not a full episode, maybe like a short capsule regarding to that. And then there's like I plan to make two episode, one in the future of naval warfare and the future of land warfare. So that's
Yeah.
pretty much.
So then maybe the second video could be like 30 minutes, a shorter presentation.
Yeah,
And then naval and land could be an hour like this one tonight.
yeah, very much that. So I know there is quite a lot of information to digest. Do you or any of your audience have any questions?
Yeah, I'll look through the audience here. I could follow this. It was actually an excellent slideshow, despite some of the typos. You covered a lot of interesting information here.
Yeah, well, English is my third language, so there's only so much I can do.
I think either the audience was just goofing off or they followed you very well because there's no questions.
Oh, but did you have any questions regarding to the?
Well, I think you did a very good job explaining how from fourth to fifth to sixth generation all that works. You go from maneuver to observe to processing data, right? Those are the three distinctions. And then fifth and sixth have stealth as well. No, that's great. I mean, that's a very concise, on the nose presentation.
Oh, thanks. Oh, one thing that I say, like I will add that point, like just to a segue to the naval warfare, is that like what generally speaking, Air Force beats a fleet. So that's actually one of the reasons why I want to cover stationary air warfare first, because basically how, like in the past, your short defense is the cannon, but now your short defense is the Air Force. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier about the stationary fighter is they will have much greater range. But in the past, a fleet can operate much closer to the mainland. But now at the fifth generation air warfare, that range like is already being pushed like I would say 1500 to a 2000 kilometer away, because that's actually the combat radius of a fifth generation Air Force. And if you go further there, when we reach to sixth generation fighters, they have much greater range. So actually one of the effects that I will cover a bit more detail when we go to Navy is that with the Air Force getting more advanced, the Navy actually become, I would say, like much weaker, so to speak.
Yeah, I would agree. We could also include, we already did do videos on the strategic missiles that China possesses. Yeah. That's another layer of coastal defense.
Yeah, but I would say a difference between the hypersonic missile and the Air Force is the missile, you can create area denial with missiles, but you cannot control the area with missiles. What you control, but with the Air Force, you actually control that area.
Right. So the Chinese developed, we won't go on too much longer, but the Chinese developed their naval strategy in part, I think, inspired by the Soviets. So, for example, the missile boat strategy, the missile submarine strategy, the first was the Soviet Oscar, where they could fire cruise missiles from underwater. Area denial, like you said, with missiles, doesn't allow you to control the area, but it does prevent the enemy from occupying that area. So what it looks like China's doing right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that they're leveraging the numbers advantage by building a lot of area denial systems. But then they have a core of resources that can actually occupy sea space or airspace or land space, which is more of an elite core rather than this large armed force of aerial denial systems.
Yes, you're correct. So the missile system of China is there to area deny the U.S. Navy, but what allowed China to control the South China Sea and what is also hope to control the West Pacific using the sectorial fighter is with the Air Force. So the Air Force is what allowed to control the area. Also, before we end the video, I will add like a open point is, do you think this real two fighter will actually provoke a response similar to the Sputnik moment? Because I've been like watching a lot of Western channel that responded to the review of these two fighters, and so far, it's been more of the same. Is a lot of the they copied is fake. So I was just because I don't know how the US was like, during the Olympic moment happened. So this is actually an open question for me. It's like maybe we should like observe this a bit, couple of few months, but I but I guess would this provoke a Sputnik moment in the US basically?
I think what would most likely happen is the U.S. media, the Western media, would just continue to play things down until they don't have a choice. So a good example historically would be the Zero fighter that the Japanese had in World War II. Initially, the United States didn't think that the Japanese pilots were as good as they were, or that the airplanes were as good as they were. And so they just kind of had for home consumption. Japanese have garbage airplanes. Japanese can't do this. And then Pearl Harbor hits, and it's like, oh, whoops.
Okay, so I guess it take more than the reveal of the fighter to actually make the military industrial complex react, I guess.
I think to get the kind of reaction you're talking about, it would probably take that, because I think they have a vested interest in just suppressing information.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
But all right, so people, your Twitter is in the description. So is there anything you want to leave the audience with, where they can find you, or if you're doing anything in the future?
So if anyone want to communicate with me, they can write me a private message in Twitters, and I also have a YouTube channel that I haven't curated too much, and that's about it.
Well, all right. Well, I want to thank you again, Ryan. It's always a pleasure. You always have well presented points.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
All right, this is Todd Lewis of the President 5 podcast, signing off.